All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dario from the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm delighted to have you here for our April edition of the Research Showcase. Today we have two external speakers who will be presenting on their research, actually very recent research that is about to be presented in days at conferences. So we have Nick Vincent from Northwestern, who's presenting a study looking at relationships between Wikipedia and other online communities. And we also have Nate TeBlunthuis from the University of Washington presenting results from a replication study looking at the impact of norms and quality control systems on open communities, replicating results from Wikipedia in other Wiki-based communities. Very excited to have you here both today. As usual, this is going to be two presentations, about 25 minutes each, followed by Q&A. And we have a discussion on IRC, and Jonathan is going to be our host and be any questions from our participants. So with that, Nick, you're welcome to start your talk.
All right. There we go. All right, hi everyone. I'm Nick Vincent. I'm a first-year PhD student at Northwestern University in the People, Space, and Algorithms Research Group. And today I'll be talking about some work that I did with my co-authors, Isaac Johnson and Ben Hecht, looking at how Wikipedia matters outside of its immediate confines. So Wikipedia has been immensely important to computing research. A huge body of literature has used Wikipedia to answer questions about social computing, about peer production, and even to train state-of-the-art intelligent technologies. But Wikipedia doesn't live in isolation, as we've seen recently in the news. In a surprise move aimed at concerns about misinformation, YouTube started linking videos about conspiracy theories to Wikipedia articles. And YouTube is not the only internet giant with Wikipedia dependencies. Facebook similarly started adding Wikipedia links to news articles that are shared by users. And this is really recent. The date on there is April 4, in case you can't see. And last year at ICWSM, McMahon et al. Demonstrated the immense value that Wikipedia adds to Google. In their lab and field studies, the inclusion of Wikipedia massively increased click-through rate. But I really want to emphasize that Google-Wikipedia relationship. In the study, the drop in click-through rate was incredibly large. It went from 26 to 14%, which means that Wikipedia basically increases click-throughs for Google by 80%, which is just massive. Together, news and research suggest that Wikipedia is important outside Wikipedia. And that means that the volunteer work of Wikipedia contributors has value and impact outside Wikipedia. And it also means that the research on Wikipedia, such as the positive effects and also negative things like bias, these may have effects outside Wikipedia as well. And this is all, there's a big vice versa here. Things that go on outside Wikipedia matter to Wikipedia. For example, if Google were to change its search algorithm, that could be a really big deal. But we're still left with a lingering question, what about other entities in the internet ecosystem? And that's what we looked at in our study. So I'm guessing that some people in this Hangout might be familiar with Reddit and Stack Overflow, either because you researched them, you're users of them, or both. In fact, if you're like me, Stack Overflow may have helped you finish your recent work, such as this paper, and Reddit may have helped you unwind afterwards with some cat pictures. So, although they're quite a bit different in purpose and scope, both Reddit and Stack Overflow are large online communities, and both of these sites include links to Wikipedia. On Reddit, Wikipedia links are often used to share interesting facts, like this sentence about the ancient Egyptian calendar. And on Stack Overflow, Wikipedia links often act as references or further reading, like in this very popular branch prediction answer, which when I wrote the paper, this was the most popular answer on all of Stack Overflow. So in this paper, we specifically looked at a sample of submissions on Reddit, and submissions are like the first post in a thread in a traditional forum, if you're not familiar with Reddit, and answers to questions on Stack Overflow. But throughout this presentation, I'll just refer to both as posts. And to show you what they look like in a context, here's a quick screenshot of just a page of Reddit posts. And here's a screenshot of a question on the top and an answer on the bottom. The big arrow points to the answer. So to frame our investigation of the relationship between Wikipedia and these online communities, we identified two research questions. First, we asked, what effect does Wikipedia have on Reddit and Stack Overflow? So how does Wikipedia add value to these other online communities? We operationalize this relationship with 4 engagement metrics. So that's user-voted scores, number of comments, views, and estimated revenue. In other words, do posts like this affect user voting, commenting, viewing, and money in the end. And then second, we asked, what effect do Reddit and Stack Overflow have on Wikipedia? We operationalized this relationship with metrics that capture value to Wikipedia, so article page views, edits, new editors, and editor retention. We especially focus on edit behavior because a major concern for Wikipedia is declining editor base. So now that we framed our research questions, let's dive into how we answered RQ1 and what we found. To start with, we first consider how many links to Wikipedia actually exist. And it turns out that Wikipedia links appear in a small fraction of posts, but Wikipedia is one of the top external sites that get linked to in both communities. So Wikipedia is the fourth most linked to site on Stack Overflow, but the top three are all just sites where code and documentation live. So specifically, it's GitHub, Microsoft documentation, JS Fiddle, which means Wikipedia is actually the #1 conceptual resource on all of Stack Overflow. And on Reddit, Wikipedia is especially prevalent on the widely subscribed to subreddits, mainly due to the Today I Learned community, which has a lot of Wikipedia links that have really high scores. And in addition to that, there is some past work suggesting a causal relationship between Wikipedia and Reddit specifically. So in 2015 at ICWSM, Moyer et al. Had a study showing that Reddit posts in the Today I Learned subreddit increased Wikipedia page views after they're posted. And that was a causal effect. So with this context in mind, we can take a look at the average metrics of posts with Wikipedia links. So here on this slide, we're looking at two plots. On both plots, the y-axis shows the mean score, and the x-axis differentiates between Wikipedia linking posts and posts without Wikipedia links, and there's an icon to reinforce that. On the left, we have Reddit posts, and on the right, we have Stack Overflow posts. And right off the bat, we can see Wikipedia links are well above other posts in terms of score. On Reddit, posts with Wikipedia links have about 5 times the score of other posts, which is quite large. And on Stack Overflow, it's about 2.5 times the score. So these are pretty big effect sizes in the associative statistics. These stats certainly suggest that Wikipedia adds value, but we want to take this analysis a step further to really understand how these Reddit and Stack Overflow posts might look in a world without Wikipedia. Because just from associative stats, we don't know if there's other factors at play, like maybe people who write long posts also happen to post Wikipedia articles a lot, and it's actually the long posts that are responsible for increased metrics. In that case, in a world without Wikipedia, nothing would change. So to answer this question, to dive into this world without Wikipedia, we identified 3 counterfactual scenarios with increasingly conservative assumptions. And when I say conservative here, I mean we're erring on the side of assuming that Wikipedia is more easily replaceable. So I'm going to walk through those now. And to walk through them, I'm going to use this example post that I brought up at the beginning and talk through these posts and how we might estimate the treatment effects in each scenario. So in our first scenario, we assume that Wikipedia is so critical to each post that in this world without Wikipedia, every Wikipedia linking post would just be gone. It never could have been authored in the first place. So that's simple to imagine. This post would just be essentially deleted from the database. It never existed at all. And that means that anything that came out of it, such as score, discussion, ad revenue, would be entirely attributed to Wikipedia. We could also imagine that perhaps roughly the same post exists, but now they became a post without any external link because Wikipedia is gone. So in this scenario, this post would be the same, but instead of linking to Wikipedia, now it's actually just a Reddit self-post. And a reasonable way to estimate the value of Wikipedia in this scenario would be to compare Wikipedia linking posts to similar posts without Wikipedia links. Finally, for an even more conservative scenario, which we can call a lower bound, we can imagine a world where every Wikipedia linking post exists with an entirely different external link. For this example, the post might instead link to the Google Books page about the topic. And as a side note, this particular book is actually the citation for the fact in the article, so this isn't so implausible. To estimate the value in this scenario, one way we could do that is to use the difference between that middle ground estimate, the value added by Wikipedia compared to similar no-link posts, and the value added by non-Wikipedia linking posts to similar no-link posts. And I'll expand how we did this in the upcoming slides. So just to emphasize again why we're going through these counterfactual scenarios in this methodology, it's because we want to understand the value that Wikipedia brings to Reddit and Stack Overflow beyond just association and correlation. And one way to estimate these treatment effects corresponding to counterfactual scenarios is causal analysis. So specifically, we use propensity score stratified regression, which is a method that's very popular in economics and medicine, but it's somewhat new to human-computer interaction. And the general idea of this method is that we want to make an estimate by making comparisons between data points with reduced covariate bias. So the covariates in this case would be things like textual features, such as text, user characteristics such as reputation, or contextual features such as when the post was made. And to put it more formally, we want to minimize the covariate bias in our comparisons, in our estimation of the treatment effects. So I'm going to walk through exactly how this works. To set the stage, let's say we have some data, in our case posts, represented here by red and blue circles. So in this case, red indicates a control post, which has no Wikipedia link, and blue indicates a treatment post, which is a post with a Wikipedia link. For each post, we're going to calculate a propensity score, which is now shown on this slide. And the propensity score captures how much a post looks like a treatment post. In practice, this is actually a logistic regression where the input is all the visible covariates, such as post length, and the output is a probability of whether the post is a treatment post or not. So any post with a high propensity score, such as 0.9, is a post that has covariates like posts that actually have Wikipedia links in real life. So based on the propensity scores, which say whether the covariates look like a Wikipedia linking post, we can separate our data into strata based on where the propensity score falls. So the posts with low propensity scores will go in the low propensity stratum, and likewise, the posts with high propensity scores will go in the high propensity stratum. Then we perform a regression within each stratum where we'd expect the covariate bias to be smaller, and then take a weighted average of the regression results, with the regression outputs weighted by how many treatment posts were actually in each stratum. And this produces an estimate called the average treatment effect on the treated, or the ATT, as you might see it in the economics literature. And just to get a quick sense of what all this actually means in terms of Reddit posts, here's two examples from a high propensity stratum. So both of these posts were actually in our high propensity stratum from our experiment, and you can see they have long, capitalized, punctuated titles, and also the posters had a very high reputation in terms of karma. So that's why these posts made their way into the high propensity stratum. To go back a little bit, to actually estimate the effect of Wikipedia in our middle ground scenario, we use this propensity score stratification method to compare Wikipedia posts to posts with no links. That's a middle ground estimate. Then to estimate the effect of Wikipedia in our lower bound scenario, we find the difference between our middle ground estimate and the effect of non-Wikipedia external links compared to posts with no links. And that's going to output a lower bound, the value added by Wikipedia in the scenario where every single link got replaced with an alternate external link. And after this procedure, we find that in our lower bound scenario, the value added of Wikipedia is smaller, but it's still quite high. So this new bar on this plot, the same plot we had before, but now there's this lower bound estimate in the middle. This shows the value added by Wikipedia. So entirely attributable, not the value of the post, but the value added. And it's still quite high. After adding this value, Wikipedia linking posts are still over 4 times higher scoring on Reddit and 2 times higher scoring on Stack Overflow, which suggests that Wikipedia really is bringing value to these online communities. We also did a similar analysis to estimate the effect of Wikipedia article quality on our value metrics, and we found mixed results. So quality mattered a little on Reddit and not so much on Stack Overflow. And finally, to contextualize all this analysis, we performed a revenue estimate. So corporate revenue is a bit of a black box, but even black boxes are vulnerable to the mighty back of the napkin calculation. So the core fact that enables this estimation is that both sites, Reddit and Stack Overflow, mainly make money by selling ads with a fixed cost per ad view. So I actually went in and looked up these costs per ad view, and the revenue is basically proportional to the views. We have views from Stack Overflow in our data dump, and on Reddit, score correlates with view. So roughly, back of the napkin estimation, revenue from Wikipedia is proportional to the views added by Wikipedia, which we just calculated. And although this estimate required making some assumptions, we tried to err on the side of being as conservative as possible. And the key conclusion here is that under our conservative estimates, Wikipedia contributes $100,000 per site per year just from article links that increased ad views that were posted in Stack Overflow answers and Reddit submissions. And it's worth reemphasizing that these figures are likely only a tiny fraction of the value Wikipedia adds all over the internet, because this is just 2 communities, which are themselves free to use. These are just yearly figures, and these are conservative estimates. So now we can dive back into RQ2, where we asked, what effect do Reddit and Stack Overflow have on Wikipedia? And to look at this effect, it's actually, the methods are much simpler. We just compare the Wikipedia metrics for each article from the week before a post was made with that article to the week after a post was made with that article. So how many views before, how many views after, et cetera. And we do see an increase in page views, as in previous work from Moyer et al. And we do see some edits from Reddit only, but in aggregate, the amount is very small. So for a quick comparison, it's 0.4 edits per post, and that amounts to about 0.002 of Wikipedia's 10 edits per second that are going on right now as I'm speaking. And we saw almost no edits from Stack Overflow, aside from a tiny, but albeit statistically significant increase in edits to low quality articles. So a small amount of Stack Overflow users did edit low quality articles after they got posted on Stack Overflow. And finally, we didn't find any evidence that Reddit or Stack Overflow contribute to the editor base of Wikipedia, either through edits from new users in the week following a post, or through an increase in retention of these new users. And these results were somewhat surprising. The large score in comments we saw suggested that users were really engaging with Wikipedia linking posts. So inspired by a previous talk from Dario at the Wikimedia Foundation, we suspected that reuse of content might be at play. For example, in that Today I Learned post I've been using as an example, the text on Reddit already contains information from the article. Here's the actual article. So if I'm a Reddit user and I'm just interested in obtaining a fun fact and moving on, I don't really have any incentive to click on this link and visit Wikipedia. And Dario Taraborelli identified this as the paradox of reuse. Perhaps Wikipedia's permissive content licensing is mitigating the benefits of Wikipedia. We saw a really strong version of that in the Google Wikipedia relationship study, and it seems like it might be going on here. So to investigate this, we did a small qualitative coding exercise, and we found that on Reddit, 79% of the posts had content quoted or summarized from Wikipedia, and on Stack Overflow, only 33% did. So this suggests that on Reddit in particular, reuse may be limiting the extent to which users are engaging with Wikipedia from other communities. And overall, this does provide more evidence that addressing the paradox of reuse is very important for the sustainability of peer production. So now to sum it all up, let's return to that diagram from the opening slide, but now we can replace those question marks with some findings. So we saw that Wikipedia adds substantial value to Reddit and to Stack Overflow, and they're both on the order of $100,000 per year or more. And we saw that the return effects were much smaller, just a small amount of edits from Reddit and likewise from Stack Overflow. And it's a bit tricky to directly compare value, the value to Reddit and Stack Overflow, which are companies, and the value to Wikipedia. But one way we could do it is if we just compare the total fraction of score that Wikipedia provides to the total of fraction of edits provided in return, we can see, so 0.7 to 0.02, there's over an order of magnitude of difference. And so this relationship can be characterized as quite asymmetrical. There's definitely a lot of factors at play here, but for now, I'll focus discussion on the important implications of these findings and some possible opportunities. So first off, these results provide more evidence that Wikipedia, consisting entirely of volunteer-created content, creates revenue for corporate entities. And this adds to a growing body of research looking at data as work, which is a new perspective that's going to have long-term implications for relationships between online entities, and even our ability to estimate economic measures like gross domestic product, GDP. What does Wikipedia mean for that? And there's some asterisks at the bottom here. I have to add a disclaimer. Looking at hyperlinks is just one way that Wikipedia interacts with other entities in the internet. Because so much computing literature relies on Wikipedia as a corpus, there are likely even deeper algorithmic dependencies between Wikipedia and any platform using natural language processing of any kind. So that definitely warrants a lot of future work. And additionally, we see some potential opportunities in our findings. What we see is that improvements to Wikipedia stand to benefit Reddit and Stack Overflow, and vice versa. So collaboration between communities could really be great for everyone. The platform owners can make more money, users can get better content, and Wikipedia can advance its mission. So this might take the form of campaigns started by community members, which could build on existing ideas, such as this Reddit post calling for fans of the video game Stellaris to update the Wikipedia article about it. Or it could come through resources like this existing Wikipedia project page, which provides a very detailed list of possible cross-community partnerships, among other resources. And together, these collaborations could help make those arrows that we were looking at much bigger and make everyone happier. Another option is design interventions, and I'm very excited about the new Wikipedia page previews I just read about yesterday, because this is a perfect example of a great opportunity. In the actual Medium blog post by Nirzar Pangarkar, he says Wikipedia previews could be adopted by other publishers as a means to provide quick context around topics. And this might be a great way for Reddit and Stack Overflow designers to basically implement a quick design intervention to help users actually engage directly with Wikipedia for the mutual benefit of everyone. And finally, these collaborations may be especially helpful to improve Wikipedia's coverage issues, where a small number of edits relative to all of Wikipedia could actually be a really large number of edits relative to an undercovered topic. For example, articles about rural areas. which are often undercovered. So to conclude, there's a lot to be done to further this line of research. Future work could look at more nuance to these relationships using additional metrics or more close looking analysis. It will be important to move beyond back of the napkin estimations and provide more formal financial estimates. And another really valuable line of future research will be looking at other communities. And in light of recent news, two especially come to mind as being very important to study, and that's Facebook and YouTube, which I'm sure will be the subject of some scrutiny in the upcoming days, weeks, and months. So with that being said, that's actually the end of my presentation. It looks like I'm about 5 minutes early here. Thank you so much for listening. I'd be happy to hear any feedback. One note I'll just add is that I'm actually prototyping this talk right now, and I'll be presenting it again at CHI, a factor on HCI, the conference on HCI research next week in Montreal. So any feedback regarding the presentation or the research would be much, much appreciated. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic, and yeah, thanks also for giving us the exclusive of your talk before it goes live to the conference. As you know, I'm very excited about this line of research. I have a few questions I wanted to ask first the room or IRC, if there's any discussion or questions for Nick. We have about actually a bit more than 5 minutes right now.
Awesome. Yes, we have one question from IRC from Tillman. Tillman asks, how is the impact of Reddit or Stack Overflow on new account creations calculated, considering that these are not tied to a particular article linked from those sites?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that we did it is we actually basically used the individual revisions as the main source of all this data. So we counted up all the revisions from the week before, counted up all the revisions from the week after, and then looked at how many of those revisions actually came from a user who registered a new account during that exact week of time. And then we took the difference between the number of revisions that came from new users who made an edit to that article. So there's definitely some limitations to this methodology, but the general idea is to look at the difference between the week before and the week after to see if we can detect an effect in terms of people navigating from Reddit to Wikipedia, creating an account, and then editing that Wikipedia article.
Awesome.
So it's actually new accounts who edited.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So it's actually, that's good. Hey, it's actually about new accounts who edited that we're counting.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, so it's specifically, it's edits that came from newly registered users.
Cool. Tillman also wanted to point out that there is that this paper was recently reviewed in our research newsletter, and I put the link in there. It's also in IRC. I can send it to you if you'd like.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I saw that, but I would love to take a deeper look.
Cool. And that's the only question so far that we have from IRC.
Okay, we have I think 2 questions here from the room.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering if, I'm not sure if Reddit and Stack Overflow are publicly traded companies, but I'm wondering what percentage that $100,000 is of their total revenue.
Great question. So first of all, as far as I know, they're both private companies. And those, basically the way that we did the calculation, the percentage of revenue is actually just the percentage of score in the case of Reddit and the percentage of page views in the case of Stack Overflow. So for Reddit, it's 0.5 to 0.7%. And for Stack Overflow, it's 0.4 to 0.9%.
Okay, so is there, I'm not sure if I'm following, but is there any way to tie those scores to actual revenue for the company? I mean, is there any way to know what that value is objectively, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the logic that we followed in the paper is to basically, so we actually do have, Reddit has released information about their revenue in the past. And for Stack Overflow, we basically did our own estimation based on looking at the actual price per ad impression and then calculating how many ad impressions appear on a page and how many total page views occurred in the year. And we added in a coefficient there to factor in for the percentage of desktop users who use ad block and a couple of other things, if I recall. So we produced the Stack Overflow number, and basically we came to the conclusion that the annual revenue for Stack Overflow in 2016 was about $21 million. And for Reddit, it's about $19 million based on their own admission in a blog post from the CFO, I believe.
Okay.
Is that answering the question?
Yes, totally. Thank you.
I have a related question. I can jump on the queue. So yeah, first off, thanks for laying out not just the results, but also the consequences. I bet this presentation is going to get some attention from our executives because of the current debate around reuse of the commons and the asymmetry you pointed out very eloquently. I was not surprised to see that the returning side of this loop is so small. I think a number of internal and external lines of research have shown that like this kind of like drive-by engagement from external communities doesn't result in high retention of contributors, doesn't result in like a significant amounts of edits. Well, significant depending on the scale, of course. But the one question that I had for you, which is something we looked at also in the past, is the question of the quality of edits. And I was curious if you had done any analysis on these edits that come in from Reddit and Stack Overflow. Are they high quality edits? Do they get reverted? Do you have any sense of what they contribute to Wikipedia?
Yeah, so we actually did, this is informal, and I could pull up these numbers from a CSV file somewhere hidden in a directory. So we did do a brief analysis, because one finding that I didn't discuss here, and it's not in the paper, is one of the communities that did provide a lot of edits other than just, so Today I Learned, r/Today I Learned is one of the big communities, r/Wikipedia is one of them, but also the Donald, which is the Donald Trump subreddit, had a lot of edits, and we were kind of surprised by that. So we did actually run an analysis to see if edits from certain communities were being reverted at a greater rate than other edits. And I'm fairly certain that the result was that overall the rate of how often edits were reverted was actually quite low. It wasn't something staggeringly high, although maybe my frame of reference is off there. So my informal answer is that it seemed like the edits were not being reverted in mass or anything like that.
I see. Interesting.
We also did one other analysis that's not reported, which was to see if there was any phenomenon where people were editing Wikipedia articles and then posting them on other sites, like to basically create their own, short-term credibility before someone could revert the vandalism. And we didn't find any evidence of that either.
Very interesting. Thank you.
One other comment from IRC. This is from Layla. Layla says, I very much appreciate the effort to estimate the financial value of Wikipedia. This can help copyright discussions and negotiations Wikimedia foundations or chapters take part in. I also want to highlight that this kind of citable information is key for some of our communities. I can speak to the Persian Wikipedia community where I'm from. We do get the kind of open free license, so what question in that community.
Awesome. That's great to hear it, and totally agree.
All right, I think we're at time for the first slot. So thanks again, Nick. Hopefully you can stick around. There's additional discussion at the end of the hour. And I want to pass it on to Nate, who's going to give a second presentation on the replication of the rise and decline study. Nate, the stage is yours.
All right. Okay, thanks a lot, Nick. It's really good. I'm looking forward to seeing your talk again, Kai, when we're in the same session. Yeah, so can I get the presentation up? Oh, wrong version of the slides. Sorry. Yeah, so I made a mistake when I made my slides, but we'll make them again. But I'll just get started anyway. I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington. and I work with Benjamin Mako Hill, who some of you may know, and we're part of the Community Data Science Collective, which is like an interdisciplinary research group between the University of Washington and the Northwestern University, Departments of Communication. And so I collaborated with Aaron Shaw and with Mako on this paper. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about it. It's about, as Dario said, it's about revisiting the rise and decline of Wikipedia. And I'm going to abbreviate the rise and decline as RAD because it's a RAD paper and the authors are RAD as well. Some of them are listening. That was Aaron Halfaker, Stuart Geiger, Jonathan Morgan, and John Riedel. And they were interested in the sort of the abrupt transition from growth to decline in the history of Wikipedia. Right. So everyone, so maybe aware that like there was this amazing period of growth that was so exciting, but then it ended in 2007, and Wikipedia has been sort of on this slow decline trajectory ever since. And Halfaker and his colleagues really wanted to understand why this was happening. And they developed a theory and a model that was centered around the survival of newcomers to the community, and that are as a sort of necessary part of sustaining a population of active editors to Wikipedia. And the idea was that like in order to sustain a population, some people are going to leave the community. There's always going to be some attrition, but as long as you can bring in new people to replace them, you can sustain growth. But the population of the amount of newcomers that were surviving was falling, and they attributed this to the quality control systems that Wikipedia introduced in order to prevent vandalism, in large part prevent vandalism. And one of the main things they found was that like the newcomers who got rejected, whose reverdits were edited, were much less likely to survive. And then making matters worse and more complicated, the quality control systems that were increasing newcomer rejection became more difficult to change. They calcified in their term, and they were especially calcified for newer editors, right? So the editors with more tenure were more likely to succeed when they attempted to change the norms, right? The norms meaning like the policy pages, as well as essays and guidelines that sort of do the work of structuring how Wikipedia is supposed to operate as an organization. They also saw that like communication with newcomers increased their chances of survival, right? So if a newcomer got messaged, or if they got messaged after they were reverted, that would make them more likely to stick around. But the rise of what I call algorithmic governance tools, which include both like fully automated bots like ClueBot, as well as tool-assisted editors, they reverted newcomers, and the newcomers who were reverted by these tools were less likely to survive, and they also decreased the amount of communication that the newcomers had. Okay, so and then tying it all together is this sort of the temporal process of the wiki, right? And so that there was this sort of as Wikipedia sort of matured, this transition took place that increased newcomer rejection, increased the algorithmic governance tools, and made it more difficult to change the norms, right? And I sort of conceptualize this as wiki age because I'm going to sort of apply this theory to an analysis of a large number of wikis that were created at different points in time. And so that makes it possible to sort of think about the life cycle of a wiki, not just the sort of history of Wikipedia as happening like in a course through time. Okay, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about like what's the rationale for like doing this replication study. And one of the rationales is that this paper has a lot of influence. It's influenced conversations across social computing and even beyond. And these are some quotes from a variety of people who all sort of say that like the quality control mechanisms of Wikipedia can be restrictive and biased against changes introduced by new editors. The rise in algorithmic monitoring and increasing rigidity of policies has been shown to reduce the number of new contributors who continue editing. And the bottom-up process of revisions by the community is far from perfect, right? And so people are taking this story and applying it to, and also these people are not thinking about wikis here. They're thinking about OpenStreetMap. They're thinking about how should we like do quality control on social media like Twitter or Facebook, and how should we think about the like ways that, or also think about like Kickstarter, right, and like crowdsourced fundraising. The third quote is not from Halfaker et al. That's just, I left the citation to Halfaker et al. In there. Just all of these people are citing this paper. Okay, and another rationale for replication, not just because the study has been influential, but because it was not like no study is perfect. There are always like alternative explanations that you can't rule out. And one of these is that like maybe there was something that happened during Wikipedia's trajectory or during Wikipedia's history that caused the decline, right? So maybe the rise of social media like Facebook actually created a competition for the attention of the editors, and so people maybe just at one point in time Wikipedia was the really exciting thing and everyone wanted to do that, but then Facebook was the really exciting thing. People wanted to do that instead. Another important part is that like the sort of original RAD story is like the importance of vandalism, right? The Wikipedia became popular, but that attracted lots of vandals, and that required quality control systems that would that contributed to the decline, right? But what if your project is smaller, and there's like lots of important projects that are smaller that don't attract the same levels of vandalism, but maybe those kinds of projects will be resilient to the rise and decline. And then the broader rationale for this for me is I want to like contribute to the science of peer production in the sense that we can, that we can, like Wikipedia doesn't just like provide a free source of knowledge. It also inspires us to think about how we can collaborate together and produce important, valuable, as like Nick just showed, like very valuable and sources of knowledge, and not just and public goods. Sorry, like very valuable public goods, and we can. And so by generalizing the RAD study, we can learn more about that. We can learn if the RAD process generalizes to other peer production communities or not, and we can learn if the and from that we can learn like are these sort of quality control problems related to newcomer retention across different projects? Can we expect open collaboration to encounter these types of difficulties in general? Okay, so I break down my analysis into sort of three parts, or three mini studies. The first one focuses on the sort of aging process of the life cycle of wikis through the and this I just replicate like three of the plots from the original RAD paper, right? So this is a study of wiki age and the relationship of age to newcomer rejection, newcomer survival, and active editors. The second study focuses on newcomer survival as an outcome, and through this I reproduce a logistic regression model from the original RAD paper to predict newcomer survival. And then in study three, the focus is on the attempts to influence the norms on wiki, right? So for this I use like wiki age, enter tenure, and another logistic regression. Okay. So my data comes from Wikia, and I'm using data from 2002 to 2010. This is and then I take all the wikis over that period, and then I just select the top 1% by the number of registered editors. So this gives a set of relatively large wikis, though some of them are pretty small, with as few as 98 editors, and then there are also some that are fairly large with as many as 300,000 editors. And they're also very diverse across topics, right? So they include all like pop culture, video games, fandom, and so on. They also have a lot of variation in their quality control systems. So the number of reverts ranges. Some of these wikis I was surprised had no reverts. Some of them use bots, but most of them do not. The edits to the project namespace, most of them use the project namespace. Most of them don't use it very much, but some of them use it a lot. Okay, so and then now I'm going to talk more about like how we measure each of these variables, right? So, and in doing this, I'm trying to follow the original RAD study as close as I can. There are limitations. I'm not able to do it perfectly, and we'll talk about that later. But to measure, but active editors are just editors who made 5 edits or more a month. A newcomer survived if they edit after 60 days. A newcomer is rejected if they're reverted. And attempts to influence norms, I use this measure of calcification. And for this, I just use edits to the project namespace. And this is a sort of proxy for attempts to edit policy. And then editor tenure is just the time since an editor's first edit. A communication with newcomers is just whether the newcomer's been messaged. Algorithmic governance tools are whether a newcomer has been reverted by a bot. And wiki age is just the time since the first edit to that wiki. And now I'm going to walk you through my results. So this plot shows the proportion of reverted newcomers on the y-axis and the wiki age on the x-axis. And the original RAD studies predicted that wiki age would be positively associated with newcomer rejection. So as time passes, more newcomers will be reverted. And this turns out to be like a pretty noisy data. And a lot of that is due to the rarity of reversion in these wikis, right? So if you see the thin red line at the bottom, that's at the median. So actually, the median wiki reverts to no newcomers in a given 6-month period. But there is like a pretty dramatic increase in the proportion of reverted newcomers early in the wiki's life, and then again near the end of their life. And Spearman rank correlation test shows that this change is actually statistically significant, even though from these like box plots it looks really noisy. Okay, and here's the original plot from RAD. So we can do a little bit of a qualitative comparison between the two, and it actually is a quite different story, right? There is like a pretty dramatic transition between 2006 and 2008 on Wikipedia, and there's sort of this noisy overall trend on Wikia, but so this one's sort of there's some nuance here to think about. In Wikipedia, maybe there's a bit more of a discrete transition between phases that doesn't always happen. Okay, so for newcomer survival, I plotted the proportion of surviving newcomers over time again, and here the trend is very, it stands out very clearly, and that newcomers tend to survive less over time as wikis age. Yeah, so, and here's the plot from the original RAD paper. We see again, we see that sort of abrupt transition. But one thing that really stands out is like how high the proportion of surviving newcomers was during the earlier period of Wikipedia compared to Wikia, right? So here the median is always like less than 0.2, and a Wikipedia it doesn't fall below 0.2 until 2007. Okay, so here's a sort of famous like rise and decline plot. So in order to make these comparable, I standardized each month standardized within each wiki. So like the units on the y-axis are in standard deviation units, and this is so that you can like sort of take the aggregation of all of the different wikis and do a single data point. But that means that this y-axis it's sort of on a like a exponential, or sorry, like a logarithmic scale. So this period of rise is actually like translates to like a pretty like substantial amount of growth during the early period, and then in year 3 we see the transition from rise to decline. And here's again that plot from the original RAD paper. And again, we see this sort of like very different qualitative, like abrupt transition that gets smoothed out because we're averaging across lots of wikis. But the like sort of overall story of like the typical experience of a wiki is like pretty similar on average. Okay. So here's results on the legislative regression that relates wiki age to Newcomer survival. And so we found, just like the original RAD paper, we found a negative effect of wiki age on Newcomer survival. And one thing that's pretty astonishing is like how similar these regression coefficients are. Like negative 0.37 in our analysis to negative 0.4 in the RAD analysis. Like that, I think that that's pretty surprising. Anyway, yeah, and then if you think about like odds ratios, this corresponds to like basically newcomers who get, sorry, this is reverted. So the reverted, we have, again, very similar coefficients, negative 0.72, negative 0.68. And this, in an odds ratio sense, this means that like in both cases, newcomers who get reverted are about half as likely to survive as newcomers who are not. The effective message is positive again. So newcomers who receive communications are more likely to survive. And the one thing that we weren't able to replicate was the effect of algorithmic governance tools on survival. And this is purely a function of the rarity of bot reversion on Wikia. It's just, there's just not enough bot reverts for us to be able to observe a relationship here. Which also tells us something about like the difference between Wiki and Wikipedia, right? That like these other dynamics of reversion and communication and the life cycle don't seem to depend on the development of the algorithmic governance tools. Okay. Now the question is like, do the norms calcify? And they do. The effective editor tenure is negative in our model as in theirs, and the norms also become more difficult to change over time. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the limitations briefly. So we go back here. They have this. We have reverted. They have deleted and reverted, and that's because we just can't observe deleted pages on Wikia. We just don't have that data. We weren't able to observe like tool-assisted editors. We think they're either very rare or they don't exist really on Wikia. And as I said before, like bot reversion is really rare. And so these two factors contributed to like our failure to observe the relationship between bot reversion and newcomer survival. And then we used the project namespace as a proxy for the policy pages. So the original RAD authors were able to tease apart different types of policy pages. So they looked at the policy pages, looked at like essays, and looked at guidelines on Wikipedia. But the norms around policy page use or like project namespace use on Wikia are just not as consistent. They vary a lot between different wikis, and we just and so we just use the project namespace as a proxy for that, for all the different norms. This is like a limitation, but I mean, like other people who've studied Wikipedia and Wikia and have done the same thing. So, and then the other thing, this one's pretty important, is that we don't try to identify the good faith newcomers from the vandals. This was an important part of the original RAD paper, and because and they like had to manually code a sample of newcomers as being good faith or vandal or like ideal newcomers, and that was to show that like, you know, that this was really affecting like these quality control mechanisms really affecting like the desirable newcomers, and this wasn't something that we really tried to do. The 740 different wikis in different languages about different things. We didn't, and then also the rate of reversion is so low that it's maybe not as big of a concern. Yeah. All right. So in conclusion, we set out to like ask if the RAD narrative generalized to similar projects, and the answer is yes. The overall story about the mechanism, the quality control mechanisms affecting newcomers seems true. Then also wikis tend to rise and decline, right? These overall trajectories, like the sort of like idea of a life cycle seems pretty consistent. Rejected newcomers are less likely to survive. Newcomers become more likely to be rejected as the wikis age. They become less likely to survive as wikis age. And then norms tend to calcify. And that means that they become more difficult to change as wikis age and become more difficult and are more difficult for less experienced editors to change. And in general, I think that the main takeaway of this study is that the RAD narrative isn't just a story about Wikipedia. It's a story about like these other wikis that are in my sample, and I think that this also points to like the broader idea that even when groups try to be open and try to have collaboration without hierarchy or without a lot of like official rules or power structures, that culture develops, norms develop, and they tend to become a barrier to the participation of people who are outsiders, right? They create like a barrier that people have to overcome before they can become active participants. And I think that's something that we still need to think about and have to wrestle with as we like think about like how Wikipedia inspires us to think about the possibilities of collaboration to producing public goods, but it also reminds us of the challenges that arise, and that there's this tension between quality control and sustaining an active body of contributors. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. So there's been a lively discussion of this on IRC. Only a couple of the things from that discussion have yet been framed as official questions or comments for you. So I'm going to start with those, and I'm going to insert one of my own as well, because I'm curious what you think about it. So first of all, Aaron Halfaker notes that when we're looking at survival rates over time, we were actually looking just at golden and good faith editors. So we were actually excluding vandals and non-serious editors, and we used a content analysis approach for that.
Yeah.
Did you, in your survival analysis, did you also exclude vandals, or was this overall survival?
This is overall survival. I brought this up in the limitations, but we didn't try to exclude vandals. I think when I tried to like identify, is this a vandal or not, on some of the wikis that I looked at, I actually had a hard time. Even the ones that were in English, because they would have like, like there's wikis in here that are about like role play and about like collaborative fiction writing. And I didn't feel like I was like a qualified member of those communities. I would have had to be a qualified member of those communities in order to be able to make those judgments effectively. And it wasn't really tractable to do that for 740 wikis.
Right. Right. That transitions a little bit into my question, so I'm going to ask it. So one of the original, there were a lot of different hypotheses, kind of armchair hypotheses in a lot of cases, proposed for the editor decline back when we were putting together this paper. And some of them were exogenous and some of them were endogenous. And one of the endogenous ones that I thought actually had some resonance to it was the low-hanging fruit hypothesis. Basically, Wikipedia filled up to the extent that all the major topics that most people wanted to, would want to edit as newcomers had already been written about. And
Mhm.
so it was harder for people to find stuff to work on. And I think that raises kind of an interesting point about the difference between some of these Wikia wikis and Wikipedia, because in Wikipedia, that hypothesis is basically, in my opinion, kind of, well, there actually, Wikipedia wasn't full up. It was just full up of the things that a lot of the people who tended to join maybe wanted to write about.
Yeah.
But I think it may have more of an absolute effect in some of these Wikia wikis, where if you take like a fandom wiki, it may really be true that everything in that particular fandom universe that needs to be covered is kind of covered at a certain point on the wiki. So it's harder to say, write about your favorite character. And I wondered, would it be interesting to look at the the completeness of these wikis at particular times in their trajectories, and how that might correlate with new editor survival?
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to look at. I think that there's a few other of these like sort of. Well, okay, so yeah, that would be interesting to look at. I think that of the wikis in this sample, a lot of them are fandom, but a lot of them aren't, right? Things that are like, there's a lot of fan fiction and there's a lot of like, collaborative writing and there's humor. And I think for those, there's not a sense that in my mind, that they would be full.
Right.
But I think in the case of like Wow Wiki, which is like one of the biggest wikis in the sample, or like, some of the there's certainly going to be, I think that the idea of absolute completeness, I think maybe does hold up a little bit better here, but there's always this sort of idea of like, things can always be better as well, right? And so it may be more difficult for, my idea is that actually that it's not so much that it's complete, but that like newcomers will find it more difficult or harder to change content that's already there. And so even if the content even if like the page already exists and has something written on it, then that they may not improve it even if it's not like complete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So a question from Tillman. You mentioned Wikipedia has been in decline ever since 2007, but the RAD graph ended in 2012, more than half a decade ago now. Has the trend continued since then?
Yeah, so you can go to I should figure the URL. There's like a stats Wikimedia. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
That has that same plot, basically like adds a point to that plot every month. And if you go there, you'll see that it does continue, though it slows. It's like, it actually is kind of like a pretty classic like logarithmic curve. Seems to be like, so yeah, basically it keeps declining. The second derivative is positive.
Cool. So we have a couple more questions, I think, that are going to be asked via the room. So I'll pass to Dario.
Actually, I want to check. I'm not sure if there's anyone here who has a question. I do have one. I want to check first. I'm going to go forward with mine. Yeah, so I do want to emphasize that, like, this question of replication across languages and sort of corroborating the results with additional analysis outside of English Wikipedia, there's still a lot of work potentially to be done to better understand, whether what the rise and decline paper identified was a primarily the primary result of like maturing communities with quality control systems, or if it applied also to other language communities, and if it did, because of what? Because of attention spillover, because of the application of these quality control tools across the board. There are many, many questions that I think could be addressed from a more multilingual perspective in a future extension of this. The one question that I want to ask you is similar to the issue John was bringing up around like the gold rush hypothesis and the idea that there might be fewer and fewer topics to work on. I was actually curious if you guys had looked into any evidence of notability policies on Wikipedia, basically preventing the creation of fandom, like articles related to more popular culture topics that resulted in a shift of attention and contributions from Wikipedia, which for a while actually was a place where people, at least anecdotally, I don't have any specific evidence to point at, but I think Wikipedia used to be a place where many people excited about comic series, TV series were contributing. I'm wondering if at some point, as a result of policies or general attitude towards contributors in these topics, there was a shift in attention and contributions from Wikipedia to some of these communities on Wikia.
Mm. So you're asking like if see if I understand the question. So you're asking like if the basically the Wikia like sort of grow because Wikipedia pushed them out, and then
Correct.
the Wikia still basically like compete with Wikipedia over editors.
Correct. Yeah. So specifically as a result of changes in policies around topics in popular culture, TV series, comics, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't really know the answer to that question. I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I guess, yeah, I didn't really look at changes on. I didn't look at anything about Wikipedia for this project, right? So,
yeah, just curious. Thank you.
It could be something to look at, yeah.
And Maker's just saying that he has some preliminary analysis on this, so yeah, I guess I'll follow up with him.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I also wanted to open up the discussion to any question about both presentations, since we're technically at the end of the hour. So if there are other questions also about Nick's talk, it's a good time to ask them. And you'll see, Nate, if you get a chance to see the IRC log, there's a huge discussion going on.
Yeah, I see.
Nate, I have a question about if you observed anything qualitatively to accompany the quantitative findings in the study about whether, because I remember in the Rise and Decline paper, I think there was a qualitative component kind of, or maybe I saw it somewhere else, verifying that editors did in fact react negatively to these things that quantitatively appear to be pushing them away. Did you detect any of that in Wikia, whether there were alienated new editors?
So I mean, I didn't do any like sort of systematic qualitative analysis for this project. I, like based on like spot checking and like seeing what's going on. I mean, I can't say that I saw anything like that that was very clearly like that to me. But that doesn't mean it's not there. I didn't look for it very hard. Yeah.
No questions are on IRC, just to establish that.
I'm going to check around here in the room. Is any other question?
Tons of questions.
Other question?
Well, because
Speak quantitative.
Sure. So yeah, for Nate, I know you said you didn't do a qualitative analysis, but did you find that there were any wikis on Wikia that didn't follow that trend, that didn't have the drop off between?
Oh yeah, there are definitely wikis that don't follow the trend. I mean, I think there are, yeah. I mean, there's a huge amount of variation within wikis, between wikis. There's just like, I think that's another thing. I probably could have emphasized that more, but that like these are like this is sort of the average story about what happens, but I think that there's so much like variation between the different wikis that you can find a wiki that doesn't decline during the period that I observed it, for sure.
Do you have any sense about like what kinds of qualities those communities might share? Like, is it just sort of random, or are there certain kinds of topics that maybe lend themselves to more sustained editing?
I don't think I don't have any information about that. I think one thing is that there will be like different communities will have different timescales, right? So some will be like sort of flash communities that build the wiki really fast and then sort of dissolve, right? And then there are other ones that, I think they're the wikis that my guess is the wikis that I have not seen decline just haven't declined yet. That they're like, I think given a long enough period that I don't think that you'll find a lot of wikis that will never decline. That's my own little pessimistic story, like belief, but I don't really know.
And I'm looking around, and if there's no other question, I want to thank again Nate and Nick for joining us today. Thanks for the fantastic discussion and presentations. Good luck with the official presentation next week at the conference. And I guess I'll see you all next month, I think on the 8th of May for the next showcase. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Awesome.
Looking forward to seeing you all again soon, someday.
Yes, hopefully.